the Houston Texans had the worst offseason out of any team. They have been back-to-back years in a strong spot to go from being the scrappy, young, interesting team with C.J. Stroud and Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter, who they brought in, and Nico Collins and Tank Dell when he's healthy. You got this team that, like, wow, they got this great young core. They could be one of the best in the NFL. They could go on to compete for Super Bowls.
Right.
It felt like last year they jumped the gun a little too quickly by going all in. And by going all in, it set themselves up for this weird, awkward position where all the moves that they made this offseason, it feels like it was all a net zero. And if anything, I think they went backwards. They traded away Laremy Tunsil, which we complained about. We thought that was stupid. CJ Stroud was one of the most pressured quarterbacks in the NFL last year, and you take away his best offensive lineman. You move Kenyon Green, who's been really frustrating, who's probably going to go on and have a great finish to his career with the Eagles because that's the get-right position for any first-round offensive lineman that hasn't played well, like what just happened with Mekhi Becton.
Why not?
And then they signed Cam Robinson to a one-year, $14 million deal, which is a cheap deal, but it's Cam Robinson who's been unsuccessful and inconsistent, especially last year. The rest of their cast, the rest of these moves are kind of funny because it's just a bunch of names of dudes that, like, what have they done lately? Derek Barnett, Braxton Berrios, Sheldon Rankins, Justin Watson, and then they traded for Christian Kirk, who, since he was brought on with the Jaguars, hasn't exactly been much. So it feels like I'm listing a bunch of moves and nothing has changed. And if anything, we've taken a step backward. The worst part why I am so fearful, if I'm a Houston Texans fan, you are in awful waters with your offensive line.
Yeah.
In a position in which you have to hit a home run with a guy who's ready to start right away on your offensive line in the draft. And if you don't get that, you could be screwed. We could be going backwards, and we could be in the same exact footing as they were this past season, where CJ Stroud couldn't play to his potential because he was getting hit so much.
It's incredibly frustrating because the Texans could have 6 cakewalk wins this year. They should be the class of the AFC South, and they still are. They will win the AFC South this season, and it'll be fine. Texans are in the playoffs. CJ Stroud, welcome to the promo. We're all excited, but it's not going to be the same because they should be pulling away from everybody. They're going to spend this year in fourth quarter brutal games versus the Colts. They're going to have a crazy one versus the Titans, just because they didn't do enough, and they did regress. And all these Texans fans are trying to post film on Laremy Tunsil to dunk on him and say, oh, he's paper tiger. The end is coming. We got ahead of it. No. He's still at that point your best offensive lineman. Getting rid of him makes 0 sense to me. It just doesn't. It will not compute. He's going to go to the Commanders. Maybe he gives up 2 sacks on the year. It's going to be better than a lot of other left tackles in the league throughout their season. Having that, I bet he has a better pass protection rate than whatever left tackle is protecting CJ Stroud's backside this upcoming year. They could have made it super easy for themselves. They're making it harder for themselves and adding just a bunch of guys to come fill spots instead of impact players, retaining or signing them. It's going to be a 10-win Texans team, obviously pre-draft speculation, but it's going to be a 10-win Texans team that could have made a lot of noise, but we're kind of burying another year of Stroud on his rookie contract. For what? Is next year, the year after this year, going to be the big setup where we're all ready to go and we're gearing up for Stroud's 4th year in the league, where he's done impeccable things but can't get right because his team can't get right? It's going to become an old story real quick. And if he's got a head on his shoulders and sees that this is how they maneuver around him, maybe I'm not taking that Burrow deal. Maybe I'm not staying here, and I will move, and I will hit free agency and become some other team's dream that's just been in waiting.
He'll probably end up staying, but I mean, like, it's always worth considering, like, hey, does a guy, it would be a unique circumstance to point out that, like, if you're Stroud and you're getting hit as much as he is, he might actually be able to put up a stink of, like, hey, if you guys aren't going to be better about building this offensive line,
yeah,
I'm not sticking around for this. Again, probably not going to happen. Just like we saw this year, Joe Burrow strong-armed the Bengals into spending way more money on keeping T. Higgins than they probably would have ever done. Ryan pointed out the track record for teams that are involved heavily in free agency isn't strong, and that's a really good point. And I tend to, just because a team was really aggressive does not mean that they're an automatic winner. And that was why I didn't want to do winners on the show. Like I don't even think that I even want to address free agency winners, because it's kind of nonsense to even pitch of like who had the best. It's easy just to go with whoever spent the most money, and that never ends up panning out.
Right.
Losers to me is very unique because it's who let a lot of their best players leave, who traded away guys that were key and important, and who didn't do enough to just address the biggest need. That's how I always picture free agency. What is your biggest problem and how do you fix it? Don't spend money at every single position, because if you go around doing that, then you tie yourself up to a bunch of long-term contracts that are going to screw you over. And then you also don't give yourself much flexibility for keeping and retaining the best draft picks that you've had. Usually if you have to spend a lot of money in free agency, it's because you did not do a good enough of a job drafting.
Right.
But if you don't go and spend money on the biggest name available or trading for the biggest name available at a key position, like for the Texans circumstance, they should have kept Laremy Tunsil and they should have offered Will Fries a ton of money. That would have been my move. Trade away Kenyon Green like they did, but offer Will Fries a bunch of money and bring in Will Fries. That would have been a successful offseason. They don't need to spend any more money outside of that.
There's a ton of options every single year. Every year I feel like there's not. And then once teams start making moves, it starts becoming very clear to me, oh, that team's taking it seriously. That is an immediate upgrade. And you can also retroactively assign a winning grade on an addition opposed to, speculating on what they're going to do the next year. So